It's pretty wild how one single political decision, made thousands of miles away, can just send these massive shockwaves through an entire global industry. And today, we're going to look at the diamond market, because it's a perfect example of just how connected and maybe how fragile our global supply chains really are.
So that's really the big question we're digging into here, right? We're going to break down how a few tariffs managed to throw the whole, complex, decades-old diamond trade into total chaos, practically overnight.
All right, so let's set the scene. The story kicks off in August of 2025. Everything in the diamond world is kind of moving along as usual, and then, bam, the spark. The United States government makes a move that takes direct aim at India, which, you have to remember, is the absolute heart of the world's diamond cutting and polishing industry.
And on August 1st, it started. The U.S. slapped a new 25% duty on all sorts of goods coming in from India. And since a massive chunk of the world's diamonds passed through India to get cut and polished, this thing hit the diamond trade like a sledgehammer.
And just in case a 25% tariff wasn't chaotic enough, things escalated fast. Just a few weeks later, on August 27th, those duties doubled to a crazy 50%. The market hadn't even had a chance to breathe, and then the second, way bigger punch landed.
So, what's the first thing that happens when something like this goes down? Well, the most immediate effect was a direct hit to prices. The market's reaction was fast, and it was not good, especially for the most popular types of diamonds. To really get what was happening, you got to look at the RapNet Diamond Index. It's basically the stock market ticker for diamonds. And just in August, it shows prices for half-carat diamonds tumbled nearly 4%, and 1-carat stones fell over 1%. The numbers don't lie. It was the smaller, more everyday diamonds that got hammered the hardest. And this graph, it just shows this relentless, day-after-day drop. You can see the lines, especially for those smaller diamonds, are basically in a freefall. This really proves it wasn't just a one-day panic. This was a sustained bleeding of value as all that uncertainty just grabbed hold of the market.
Now, with prices dropping and costs just skyrocketing, businesses couldn't just sit there and take it. This whole new economic reality kicked off this frantic, industry-wide scramble to completely rethink supply chains that have been working just fine for decades.
And here's where it gets really weird. This whole thing basically created two separate markets. All of a sudden, a diamond that was physically inside the US was worth way more than the exact same stone that was sitting in India. That normal price difference between US and Indian stock, which is usually like 10 to 12%, it ballooned to 16%, and even that wasn't enough to cover the new tariffs.
You can just imagine the logistical nightmare this caused. Companies were desperately trying to find any loophole, any alternate shipping route to get around these massive duties. Some took the huge step of flying their entire inventories to the US just to get ahead of the tariffs. That's a massive, expensive move. And if all that economic chaos wasn't enough, the whole thing became a legal mess. So first, the tariffs hit. Then they doubled. But then, get this, just 2 days later, on August 29th, a US court actually said the tariffs were illegal. But, and this is the craziest part, the government kept collecting the duties anyway. Can you imagine trying to run a business in that kind of environment?
So yeah, this wasn't just a headache for importers and exporters. The disruption sent tremors all the way up and down the supply chain, affecting everyone from the miners pulling stones out of the ground to the jewelers putting them in rings.
The knock-on effects were just everywhere. Demand for rough diamonds dried up because big suppliers like De Beers couldn't get their customers to pay the inflated prices. Major retailers started switching their orders to synthetic, lab-grown diamonds to avoid the tariffs altogether. Smaller, independent jewelers who couldn't afford to buy a bunch of inventory started asking for goods on memo, which is basically on consignment. And kind of ironically, all this turmoil actually pushed Indian suppliers to focus on their own local market, which created this surprise boom right at home.
And this quote really, truly gets to the heart of it. It wasn't just the cost of the tariffs. It was the crushing uncertainty. If you have no idea whether a 50% tariff is going to exist next month, or if a court ruling is going to stick, how can you make long-term plans? You can't. You can't invest. The entire industry was just stuck, completely paralyzed.
So, where does that leave everyone now? Well, the immediate crisis of August 2025 is over, but the market is still in this really fragile, unsettled state. The core problem? It's still not resolved. See, the fundamental issue is that the duties are still being collected, even though a court said they're illegal. And with a potential Supreme Court fight looming on the horizon, nobody has a clue what the rules are going to be in 6 months or even a year from now. And that ongoing legal limbo is what's keeping the market in turmoil.
Which leaves us with the big, final question.
Is the industry going to adapt and find some new balance? Maybe with different supply routes or a bigger role for synthetics? Or has this whole mess permanently broken a global market and maybe served as a huge warning sign for other industries about just how fast the ground can shift right out from under you?